Indo-Iranian frontier in the 9th and 10th centuries, Saffarids, Hindu-Shahis, and the Pre-Islamic Pashtuns. This article examines the transformative period of the 9th and 10th centuries in the region encompassing modern Afghanistan and Pakistan, moving beyond traditional narratives focused on the Arab Caliphate and the later Ghaznavids. It argues that the Safarid dynasty of Sistan acted as the crucial catalyst for geopolitical, religious, and ethnic reconfigurations. Utilizing a framework of primary source analysis, including chronicles, numismatics, and epigraphy, this study explores three interconnected themes: the Saffarids as exponents of Iranian political and cultural revivalism, the resilience and adaptation of the Hindu-Shahi dynasty as the last major Hindu-Buddhist polity of Gandhara, and the early historical attestation of the Pashtun tribes as a pre-Islamic, non-integrated population on the frontier. The paper concludes that this era was defined not by a simple binary of Islamic conquest and Hindu resistance, but by a complex interplay of Iranian autonomy, the decline of Arab central power, the steadfastness of Indian border states, and the nascent presence of the ethnic groups who would later define the region's identity. Walt, Introduction. The history of the eastern frontiers of the Islamic world has often been told through the lens of two major epochs: the initial Arab incursions of the 7th and 8th centuries and the dramatic Turco-Islamic expansions of the Ghaznavids and Ghurids in the 11th and 12th. The intervening 9th and 10th centuries, however, represent a critical and underappreciated interregnum. This period witnessed the exhaustion of the Arab imperial thrust and the rise of local Iranian powers that would fundamentally reshape the political and religious landscape. This analysis constructs a detailed academic examination of this transition, centering on the Safarid dynasty from Sistan, the Hindu-Shahi kings of Kabul and Gandhara, and the earliest clear references to the Pashtun tribes in the mountainous periphery. This paper will proceed in 4 parts. First, it will analyze the Safarid revolution, framing it as a movement of Iranian ethno-political resurgence and the true foundation of sustained Muslim political power in the eastern Afghan region. Second, it will deconstruct the history of the Hindu-Shahis, examining their political strategies, cultural output, and the enduring historical puzzles they present. Third, it will assemble the scattered evidence for the Pre-Islamic Pashtuns, analyzing their position as a frontier population not yet absorbed into the Islamic or fully integrated into the Hindu cultural spheres. Finally, the paper will synthesize these threads to argue that the 9th and 10th centuries constituted a distinct historical phase defined by the transfer of Islamic initiative from Arabs to Iranians, setting the stage for the eventual, decisive incorporation of the Pashtun highlands and the Indus Valley into the Muslim world. Part 1. The Safarid Revolution, from Persianate heterodoxy to Eastern vanguard. The rise of the Saffarids marks a definitive end to Arab hegemony in the East. It is evident that by the end of the 2nd Islamic century, the strength of the Arab thrust towards the East was spent. The subsequent vacuum was filled not by the Caliphate, but by forces from the periphery, most notably from Sistan. I.1. The Kharijite. Precedent and anti-Arab sentiment. The Safarid emergence cannot be understood without the context of the Kharijite rebellions. A nuanced analysis reframes the Kharijites from mere religious schismatics into a socio-political movement with popular support, a national and popular movement directed against Arab domination and taxation. The actions of certain leaders, abolishing tribute, executing Abbasid tax agents, and founding new settlements, demonstrate a comprehensive rejection of Abbasid political and fiscal authority. This establishes a critical precedent. The Eastern Iranian world was a fertile ground for movements that combined Islamic fervor with a strong anti-Arab, pro-local autonomy agenda. The observation that Kharijite doctrines may explain later heterodoxies among certain Pashtun tribes is a profound insight, suggesting that the initial Islamic influences in the Pashtun highlands were heterodox and militant, not the orthodox Sunni Islam of the Caliphate or the later Ghaznavids. 2. Yaqub-i-Lais, the Iranian warlord Yaqub-i-Lais, is the central figure of this narrative, presented as a paradigm shifter. His humble origins as a coppersmith and his background as a highwayman are emblematic of a self-made, non-aristocratic leadership that challenged established hierarchies. Anecdotes from contemporary chronicles illustrate his cultural program. His rejection of an Arabic poem and his patronage of Persian poetry are presented not as mere personal preference, but as a political act. This signifies a deliberate reclamation of a pre-Islamic Iranian cultural identity within an Islamic framework, representing one of the first times after the Arab conquest that poems were recited in Persian among Persians. His military campaigns were equally revolutionary. By capturing Kabul, seizing its idols, founding Ghazni, and campaigning from the Hindu Kush to Balkh, Yaqub achieved what the Arabs had not. He consolidated Muslim control over the key urban centers of southern Afghanistan. Most importantly, he was the first to have enlisted Afghan tribesmen on a large scale in his army, specifically the Khalaj. This marks a pivotal moment in the region's military history, integrating the nomadic and semi-nomadic pastoralist populations of the region into the armies of a Persianate state, a practice Mahmud of Ghazni would later perfect. A compelling argument can be made for the Saffarids' foundational role, stating that Yaqub the Saffarid anticipated the career of Mahmud of Ghazni. The main difference was one of scale, not kind. A speculative conclusion, pondering what would have happened had Yaqub taken Baghdad, is a valuable historiographical exercise. It underscores the potential for an alternate history where an Iranianized, tribal-centric military elite could have dominated the Central Islamic world, potentially altering the course of Islamic history and the cultural development of Baghdad itself. Part 2. The Hindu Shahis, Resilience and Enigma on the Frontier. The Hindu Shahis are presented not as a dying relic, but as a formidable and sophisticated polity that served as the primary bulwark against Islamic expansion for over 2 centuries. 2. 1. Political adaptation and strategic depth. The Shahi response to Safarid pressure demonstrates significant strategic resilience. The transfer of their capital from Kabul to Wai-Hind after the capture of Kabul was a strategic retreat that allowed them to consolidate their power base in Gandhara and the Punjab. Evidence indicates their continued control over crucial territories west of the Khyber Pass and their ability to project power, as seen in expeditions to avenge the sack of religious sites. The discovery of royal inscriptions in Swat confirms the extent of their realm, controlling vital trade and invasion routes from Kabul to the heart of Gandhara. 2. The Hindu Shahiya question. Coins, chronicles, and kings. A central mystery of Shahi historiography is the discordance between literary and numismatic sources. King list provided by a key contemporary chronicler is difficult to reconcile with the coins that bear different royal names. Plausible hypotheses exist that an early king may have adopted a specific regnal title, and that the prolific coins of one ruler may have remained in circulation under his successors, explaining their rarity for later kings. The most astonishing numismatic evidence is the imitation of Shahi coin types by the Abbasid Caliph al-Muqtadir in Baghdad. This act is unprecedented and speaks volumes. It suggests that Shahi coinage was of such high quality and economic importance in the frontier regions that the Caliphate felt the need to co-opt its monetary standard to facilitate trade or assert symbolic authority, a powerful testament to the Shahi's economic and cultural influence. And 2. 3. A chronicler's chivalry and the narrative of decline. The respectful, almost chivalrous tone of a key contemporary chronicler towards the defeated Shahi kings is a crucial point of source criticism. As a scholar under Ghaznavid patronage, his admiration for his Hindu adversaries adds a layer of credibility and humanizes the dynasty. It counters the triumphalist narrative found in court chronicles and suggests that the Shahs were recognized by their peers as noble and righteous rulers, even in defeat. Part 3. The Pre-Islamic Pashtuns, the tribal populations of the Suleiman Mountains. Perhaps the most significant contribution of this analysis is the systematic collation of evidence for the Pashtuns in the pre- and early Islamic period, firmly establishing their presence and non-Islamic status. 3. 1. Assembling the ethnogenetic evidence. The evidence meticulously traces the external references to the Pashtuns, creating a coherent timeline. 3rd century CE, a Sasanian inscription. 6th century CE, an Indian astronomical text. 7th century CE, a Chinese pilgrim's account locating a tribe in the northern Suleiman Mountains. 10th century CE, a geographical treatise that distinguishes Afghan from Muslim in a specific region. 11th century CE, a definitive account describing them as rebellious, savage races and, crucially, Hindus living in the mountains west of the Indus. This chain of evidence is compelling. It places the Pashtuns in their traditional homeland for centuries and confirms that they were a distinct ethnic group recognized by their neighbors. 3. 2. A pre-Islamic non-integrated frontier population. The testimony of an 11th century chronicler is the cornerstone of the argument. His designation of the Afghan tribes as Hindus is unequivocal evidence of their religious status at the dawn of the 11th century. They were not Muslims. Furthermore, his description of them as rebellious and savage, and another source's distinction between Muslim and Afghan, indicate they existed outside the control of both the Hindu Shahis and the Muslim powers to the west. They were an autonomous, tribal, and politically fragmented people, occupying the liminal space between two major cultural spheres. The ethnonym Pashtun is absent in these early records. They are Afghans, a name given by outsiders, while their self-identifying term was yet to emerge prominently in the historical record. Synthesis: the tripartite struggle for the frontier. The 9th and 10th centuries on the Indo-Iranian frontier were defined by the interaction of these three forces: the expansionist, Persianate Islam of the Saffarids, the resilient Indic civilization of the Hindu Shahis, and the autonomous pre-Islamic Pashtun tribes in the highlands. The Saffarids broke the stalemate. They ended Arab political supremacy, delivered the first major blow to the Kabul Shahi, and began the process of integrating the region's tribal manpower into Islamic armies. The Hindu Shahis, in response, demonstrated remarkable fortitude, adapting their state structure and holding the line in Gandhara for another 150 years. Meanwhile, the Pashtun tribes watched from their mountains, as yet unconverted and unsubdued, but now increasingly exposed to the forces that would soon transform their world. The lament about the astonishing gap in knowledge regarding these tribes is a poignant reminder of the limitations of our sources. The dynastic annals of Arabs, Persians, and Hindus alike largely ignored the internal social history of these tribal populations. It is only through the keen eye of certain scholars that we catch our first clear, albeit external, glimpse of the people who had become the dominant ethnic force in the region. Conclusion: this analysis offers a sophisticated and persuasive narrative for a pivotal century. It successfully shifts the historical focus from the Caliphal center and the later Ghaznavid climax to the crucial formative period of the Safarid ascendancy. In doing so, it restores agency to Iranian actors, accords the Hindu Shahis the complexity and respect their longevity deserves, and firmly plants the Pashtuns in the historical landscape as a pre-Islamic entity. The period was not one of a static frontier, but a dynamic crucible where Iranian revival, Indian resistance, and indigenous tribal identity interacted to shape the future of South and Central Asia. The Saffarids were the catalyst that set in motion the process that would, within a century, see the mountains of the Pashtuns become a heartland of Turco-Persian Islamic power and a launchpad for the conquest of the Indian subcontinent.